on the one hand we have the infinite, and on the other hand we have the limited. On the one hand we have good and we have evil. The question is, what pairing do we make? Do we call the infinite good and the limited evil, or do we call the infinite evil and the limited good? Now, traditional theism, or even monism, sort of looks as the infinite as good and the limited as evil. Christianity does this. Judaism, to an extent, does this. Islam does this. Any monotheism will do this. But then you come to people like, you can even talk about Charles Dickens. He compares the hearth, the family home, the Christmas scene, the nativity scene, actually, which is a Christian concept. But it's the concept of, the goodness of Christ in the nativity, symbolizing like the Christian family's home within the city of London, which is this decadent, degenerate criminal city. Or you can talk about H.P. Lovecraft, where there might be elements of goodness, there might be superficial humanity, but that's just a veneer, and beneath the veneer is this titanic, subterranean, nth dimensional realm, this Chthonian realm of Cthulhu and the old gods. So we have Lovecraft, we have even Charles Dickens, we have the pessimists and Schopenhauer had this view of the universe of this infinite desire, this infinite will as being the overriding unifying element or principle of reality, and he viewed it as evil. And to the extent that there was good, it was the ascetic who hid away in the mountains and tried to deny his own desire, and that was what it meant to be good. So you have the traditional Christian conception, the Judaic conception, the Islamic conception that says good is the infinite and evil is that which is limited, that which tries to deny unity with divinity, that which tries to go its own way. Shaitan, the one who is the opposer, the one who opposes the will of God, the one who tries to do things his own way. And then you have the Lovecraftian, Dickensian, and even I would say the heroic conception, or sometimes the anti-heroic, where it's the hero is this small spark of light, like Christ in the Nativity, or, Beowulf, or I shouldn't say Beowulf, I should say Siegfried against the dragons. You have like a small town, or like Lord of the Rings, the idea that you have like this darkness on all sides, and you have like Helm's Deep, and it's the last bastion of civilization, and it's this tiny little thing, and that scene really concentrates the goodness, right? The goodness even within the castle. You have people who are in despair, people who are doing things in desperation, and they don't have much hope. And the purity, like even within the characters, they're like they have this glimmer of hope, or this like their positivity in that moment is very bleak. And of course you have the orcs who seem like this infinite horde, and they're just closing in. Now the inflection point in that scene is when Gandalf comes, and Gandalf comes as this little spark of like the dawn. Just this little shimmer, this glimmer on the horizon, and then he overwhelms the scene, and his, the warriors behind it, the riders, they overwhelm the scene, and they spread this infinite light, and the darkness just becomes a speck, it becomes a shadow that's wiped out. So that's the inflection point where you go from the infinitude, the limitlessness of evil, and the limited nature of good, to the limitlessness of good and the limited nature of evil. And we even talk about, if you look at Tolkien, you look at what happens after the ring is destroyed, they're still orcs. Like, the orcs aren't just genocide off the face of the earth, they still exist, but they hide in the caves. So it goes from a situation where Sauron's overrunning Middle Earth to a situation where now the orcs have to hide in caves. So it goes to the question of, what is your interpretation of reality? What's your personality? We could say that there is like a truth or falsity to one of these perspectives. There's certainly a lot of people, I think like a self-help guru is going to say something like, the universe is infinite good and evil is really tiny and minuscule. And I suppose one way we could kind of construct some syllogisms would be in the following way. The first one would be to, when we look at ourselves and we look at evil, and we ask ourselves, who is responsible for the evil within ourselves? We find imperfections, we find inconsistencies with an ideal, we find a lack of self-control, we find, we understand the concept of genius, right? People whose minds simply work differently, and therefore they're able to achieve different results. But then we can look at someone who has quite an average mind in terms of, their mathematic ability or their vocabulary. They're fairly average in their conversation, in their knowledge. They're not very exceptional, but they have this capacity for hard work, and so they're able to kind of forego distractions and to focus on something very intently. And by focusing in that way and by eliminating distractions, they're able to achieve above the ordinary, above the mediocre, not because they're a genius, but simply because they concentrated their power. I mean, if you consider all the time that people spent on entertainment and luxury, the act of consumption, if they had spent an equal amount of time on creation, and if they focused their creative power, not trying to make a little bit of everything, paint a great painting and compose a beautiful sonnet, but if they just took one talent that they're slightly good at, or that they're slightly interested in above everything else, relatively, they focused on that, then that would be an interesting experiment, wouldn't it? It's kind of a sad thing when you look at it that way. You start logging the hours that you might watch TV or movies or video games or pornography or whatever you do with your free time. Pickup artistry, the going to parties, chasing women, all the sort of pastimes that we have and that are cyclical in nature and they're consumptive in nature. You're seeking an experience, you're seeking a euphoria, and you do it over and over again. And there's no product to it. There's no satisfaction at the end of the day. There's no point where you say, okay, that's enough, it's time to move on. It just goes on and on forever, basically, until you die. Whereas an act of creation, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You begin the project, you work on it, you come to a conclusion, and then you publish it, and then it's something that exists, and I don't know if it matters, but maybe there's a chance that if you do that enough times, you could hone some kind of craft and have some kind of value to other people rather than simply consuming solipsistically for yourself. So if we look at our own lives and we say that maybe I'm not doing anything criminal, I haven't broken the law, maybe I'm not like a net negative in the world, maybe I'm a net positive, but am I doing the most possible good that I possibly could be doing? That's a question that most people don't stand up against. They can't really say, yes, I'm absolutely doing the best I possibly can. And if they really do think that, then they probably have a very narrow-minded, naive, and again, a solipsistic view of the world and reality. If someone says, oh, I'm doing the best I can, what are their priorities? How do they define the best I can? Is doing the best I can saying like, well, I need my downtime, I need my video game time, I need this, I need that, and they're saying that they need all these things. The question is, do they really need those things? What are their priorities? Their priority satisfying themselves, or is their priority helping other people and improving the world to the best extent possible that they're capable of? What are their capabilities? what is the capability of a human being, and how we define, do we define our own abilities, or are our abilities defined for us? So someone who can stay awake for 32 hours in a time of war during a battle, or someone who can survive in the wilderness for weeks or even months. When we look at those people, we ask ourselves, is there something distinct about those people? Is that a different kind of person? Is that another species? Am I of that species? And if we are different, is it simply genetic? Are they a different race? And you start to look at your ancestors and say, well, they did essentially survive in the wilderness without modern technology for months and years. Are they a different race than the race that I am? Or do I have the same capabilities? And the fact that I think that's impossible or insufferable, that I could never do that simply because I would rather die than put in the hard work, is that simply a mindset? So we ask these questions, and after a thorough investigation, I think we come to the conclusion that most people are not putting all their capabilities to use, that we are lazy. And laziness, slothfulness, pursuing what feels good in the moment is wrong from the perspective of doing the greatest good for the world rather than for yourself. So if we start from that position, we have a point where we can say pretty much everyone, or 99% of people, are failing. They're failing to do what's right. And we're all failing to do what we really would like to do in our highest state of consciousness, in our highest state of awareness. When we cease to chase after, like a hamster chases the cheese on the hamster wheel, we cease to chase after the immediacy of the moment, and we look at things from a divine, timeless perspective of what is beautiful at the end of all things. When we let go of the immediacy of cyclical, again, chasing desires. If you had to watch a movie of your life, would you want to watch over and over again, the storyline of how you were watching this movie, you're engaging in some kind of entertainment, versus would you want to watch yourself creating something great or building something great, whether that's a relationship with another person or whether that's some kind of piece of art or whatever? What kind of movie would you rather watch? Would you rather watch 12 hours of you just sitting on a couch in front of a TV? Would you rather watch you composing a piece of music or building somebody else up, or creating friendships or bonds of brotherhood or something like that? With that kind of perspective, most of us are not doing the best that we could, and so we have to ask, why are we not doing the best that we can do? Now, probably the first explanation that people can give is an explanation relating to the past. So they'll say something like, well, I can't do that because my parents gave me bad genetics, or I can't do that because of events in the past that corrupted me, that caused me to have negative psychological traits. I'm depressed because of events in my past. I didn't receive enough love, and so as a result, as a coping mechanism, I shut off my emotions to defend myself, to protect myself. I am apathetic, and this apathy protects me from the depression that I would feel from this loveless life I live. But it also makes me very unmotivated. So it's a double-edged sword. It protects me from the pain that one would feel of being lonely, the sharp pain of loneliness. I don't feel that because I'm apathetic, but on the other hand, I'm completely unmotivated. Emotionlessness works both ways. and we could take a whole number of things, like a whole number of examples of things, I blame my parents for this. I blame the environment I was born into. I blame the era. I blame the current year. I blame liberalism. I blame degeneracy. I blame, it's not my fault, it's the boomers' fault. The boomers have done it. So there's a lot of blame, there's a lot of scapegoats. But blaming these things and these people is not really going to work to change you in most cases. Raise your hand and go in maybe a theoretical crowd of 100 people. Raise your hand if blaming past events has ever helped you change yourself. If saying, it's my parents' fault. Oh, of course, I never thought of that. It's my parents' fault. Oh, well, now I'm ready to change for the better. I'm lazy because of my parents. Well, that means I'm going to start being productive. I mean, if blaming other people helps you become a better person, then I guess I support that, but I don't think that actually works for most people. I think most people, if you blame your past, your genetics, your family, your history, if you blame something that happened in the past, you can't change the past, you can't control the past. And so there's nothing you could possibly do to change yourself. If that's your mindset, if your mindset is, my problems are a result of past events, then you can never become a better person. It's not possible. Within the framework that you've designed, within the universal scheme that you conceived of, within the reality that you perceive, there is no possible way to improve yourself if you are a result of these past actions. So what's the second step? We've described like the first stop on the train. What is the second stop? Well, the second stop is you say, I'm going to take personal responsibility. I'm responsible for my imperfections, and I have to own them. I cannot blame the past. I cannot blame my genetics. I cannot blame my parents. I cannot blame anyone else except for myself. I am to blame for my inadequacies. If I'm lazy, that's my fault. If I don't get up in the morning, if I'm late, if I miss a due date, if I procrastinate, if I chase a distraction, if I say I'm not quite ready to work yet, I just need to do one more thing before I work, if I stay up late at night, if I neglect my exercise, if I neglect social events, if I neglect things that I should be doing, then that is my fault. My fault. My most grievous fault. I have to take personal responsibility. So that's the second step. We went from blaming others, blaming the family, blaming the genetics, blaming all that, which leaves you really no room for improvement because you can't change things that happened in the past. Now you're at the personal responsibility stage. And a lot of people, especially in the conservative movement, libertarian types, these are usually, 20, 30, 40-year-old men and older who will say, if you just take personal responsibility, you can solve all your problems, because once you realize that you have the agency over your actions, then you're going to start doing the right thing. Which is not true, especially for millennials. It's just not true. It's kind of depressingly not true. It's grotesquely not true. People can very thoroughly understand and take responsibility for their own actions. People can say, look, every day I wake up, I roll out of bed, I go to my classes, I don't really do the work, or I do it last minute, I don't do a very good job. Assignments are assigned, and I kind of do the ones that I know I have to do, and I know I can always get an extension from the professor, and I kind of just do, I'm always kind of scraping along like a tire with no rubber on it, just the metal tire just kind of scraping along the road, being carried along by the inertia of the vehicle around me. And I'm just sort of scooting by and doing the least amount of work possible, always putting, and it's a miserable experience. But that's what so many people do in college. And maybe they eventually drop out and work a minimum wage job somewhere. But in any case, you're at that stage where you're like, look, if you ask me, whose fault is this? Why did I drop out of college? Why did I neglect my duties? And why did I not care? Why was I so apathetic? Well, I could blame my parents. I could blame my past. Whatever, fine. I'll take personal responsibility, fine. It's all me, me, me. But despite the fact that so many millennials are capable, perhaps, of taking personal responsibility, and they get to that second stage and they say, yeah, it's all about me. I could change if I wanted to, but I don't want to. I don't want to change. I don't need to change. I enjoy being miserable. I enjoy being depressed. I enjoy hating life. Or maybe I don't enjoy it. Maybe it is miserable, but at the end of the day, I just hate myself too much to change. And living like this is a kind of self-destructive, self-punitive action that I take because I hate myself, because I'm imperfect, because I'm unlovable, because I'm a bad person, I'm a flawed person. And I do agree, I am a sinner, and I am if people who don't know me might like me, I might superficially look like an okay guy, but then deep down inside, I'm really just this terrible, terrible creature. And because I know that, because I'm so much wiser than all these people out there who think, oh no, you seem like a perfectly nice young man, they don't really know me. I know me best, because I'm very introspective. I know myself best. And because I know myself best, I know that I deserve to suffer and burn and die. And, so my whole life has been a path of self-destruction. I've gone into drugs, and I've gone into alcohol, and I've basically done everything to sabotage myself. All my relationships I get into, whenever I draw in too close to people, I become afraid that they're going to see the real me. And if they see the real me, then they're going to discover that I'm really this evil person, and then they're going to reject me. And I'm afraid they're going to reject me, so I try to reject them first, and I, just in a number of ways try to self-destruct the relationship. I try to head it off, maybe I become unresponsive. Maybe I, skip social events. Maybe I just do mean, nasty things. I act in a terrible way, and I keep pushing them away from me until they finally just say, this isn't something I want to be a part of, and then we grow more and more distant until the thing is entirely over. So you're at the second stage, right? You blame yourself for everything, and you beat yourself up for anything. So the first stage is where you're beating everybody else up. You're scapegoating. You're putting all your problems on other people. You're saying, I'm fine, I'm perfect, I never did anything wrong. It's those people, and I can't change because those people hurt me. That's the victim stage. You're the victim of other people. Then you move to the second stage, which is kind of like the self-hating stage, the self-condemning stage, but you don't have any way to change because a bad person can't, create good fruit. A bad tree can't bear good fruit. So if you believe that you're a bad person, you're responsible for your own actions, you act badly, how could you ever change? How could good things ever come from a bad tree? So you're stuck in that mindset now of, I take personal responsibility, I'm going to suffer for my terrible actions, my way of life, but there's no way that I can possibly change. And I can't help myself, and no one's going to help me. I'm an adult now. Or my parents don't care. Or, there's no one out there who's going to baby me and shape me into the person that I should be. I'm too far gone because of, whatever factors, but I can take personal responsibility for it, but that doesn't change anything anyways, because at this point, whoever I blame, whether I blame other people or I blame myself, I am just too far gone to ever change, and that's the end of that, and so why bother trying? And that makes a lot of sense, actually. If you look at, can a dog teach itself calculus? No. Someone who is incapable of doing something cannot change themselves. So other people can't change you. You can't change yourself. So you're really stuck at this position. And where do you go? Do you hire a life coach? Where do you go from here? And I suppose you could, but the third stop is really you need, and I guess this is what the Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step program and everything, they say you need some kind of higher power. And I talk about it in terms of the third person. So if you start at the second person, you say, you messed me up, parents, you messed me up, genetics, you messed me up, environment, you are the problem. So that's the second person. That's usually the first stage on the blame game. First we blame our parents, our genetics, we blame past events. So that's the second person. You have the subject and the object. The object is the outside world. It's out to get you. You're paranoid. You're believe that you deserve much better, but the world has screwed you, so you're the anti-hero. So that's the first stage is the second person. The second stage is the I stage. That's where I did it wrong. I'm a bad person. I'm incapable of change. It's all on me. I take responsibility, but what use is that because I can never change? So then you're at the second stage, which is the I stage. You get to the third stage, that is the third person. That's the they and the he. So he is God. That's like traditionally function of God. But they could also be the community. They could be my racial group. They could be the conservative movement. They could be my church. They could be my sports team. They could be my college. They could be my professor. They could be my mentor. They could be anything outside of yourself which is a positive influence on you. And so here's what you do. You look at it, you say, well, I can't blame my past because that's not going to help me at all. Like, I can understand my past, and maybe that helps me understand my flaws, and it helps me better work on them, but it doesn't actually help me work on them. It only helps me understand the problem. It doesn't give me a solution. You're never going to come up with a solution from your past. You can only understand problems from the past, so you don't have any tools to fix them. And then your second stage is, okay, I can't just blame myself, because if I blame myself all day and I focus on why I'm such a bad, evil person, I focus on my problems, it doesn't actually help me solve them. I still don't have a tool to solve my problems. Blaming the past hasn't solved my problems. Blaming myself hasn't solved my problems. Condemning myself, beating myself up, destroying my own life, sabotaging myself, punishing myself, it has not solved my problems. What is going to solve my problems? That is the third stage. That is the they. And I talked about this, I believe, in nationalism and idealism. You need some kind of in-group or some kind of mentor or some kind of God or some kind of higher power, something above yourself, something outside yourself, some higher rung of your identity, because then you can identify with a relationship to a thing that will bring you out of your problematic state and bring you into a solution state. So you're currently in a state where you're like, I'm miserable, I'm destructive, I'm negative. But then you look at God and you say, God is so perfect and so good, and I just want to worship God. And even though I'm miserable and I'm disgusting, God is so perfect and good and lovely, and I'm just going to serve God, and I'm just going to allow the Holy Spirit to come in me, and I'm going to be a vessel for God. And even though I'm just disgusting, you know what? That is how powerful God is, that God even uses disgusting, despicable creatures in beautiful ways. And I have all this faith, and I'm just going to surrender myself, and all my intellectualism, I'm going to let go of that, and I'm just going to pray to Jesus, and Jesus is going to use me and take the wheel and redirect my life in a new way. And I'm not going to make choices or decisions anymore. I'm going to let God make those choices and decisions. I'm going to ask God. I'm going to pray to God. I'm going to say, God, what should I do right now? Is this the right thing? And is this the wrong thing? I'm going to leave it totally in God's hands. And I'm going to let go of all my desire and completely submit and surrender. I'm going to die to myself and let that heart of stone die, and I'm going to get a heart of flesh from God. So that's one way that people, they stop blaming the past, they stop focusing on how terrible they are, and they start focusing on the goodness of God. Now, atheists will come along and say, we don't need God. We don't need that. We can actually solve problems another way. And the way that they solve those problems is they're referencing something like humanism or globalism as a strategy, as something that they want to do, that they want to fight for. There are, I guess, atheists like Tom Metzger who are fighting for the race, fighting for the white race and the ideals of the white race. So if you're a miserable young white man, and you see the world is kind of against you, then maybe you can latch on to your race as a kind of a third person or a group or something you can identify with. You can say, well, my life is pretty miserable. I'm under attack from all sides. My government attacks me. Women attack me. My parents attack me. The media attacks me. Immigrants attack me. Everyone is attacking me. Everyone's humiliating me. Comedians attack me. Religion attacks me. The university system attacks me. No one is on my side. I have nothing. I have, and you get into the question of how everything is connected. I mean, with social media, people are more friendless than ever in reality. And so, you look at it and you're like, I'm in debt from school. I don't have any real friends. I don't have a job. Or if I have a job, it's a terrible job. I don't have any prospect of a future, because who can get married in the current climate? I don't have a religion. I was never given faith, and the entire modern world is constructed in such a way as to destroy whatever nascent faith I might try to foster. And, my whole educational instruction is designed to just make me conflictory and have all this self-doubt about, anything, because the moment I start to believe anything the Bible says, then it's just like, that's, the Christianity is conflated with Zionism. Christianity is conflated with love for immigration. Christianity is conflated with feminism. Christianity is conflated with this and that and the other thing. And so any moment you try to identify with any kind of traditional religious faith or any kind of theism, the natural doubt that comes into your mind is, this is really self-hating, because it's connected with all these ideologies that are trying to destroy me. And so then people identify with their race, and they say, even though I have nothing, at least I have this race. I have this memory of this ancestors, and I have this proud tradition. I can try to live up to that, and I can try to, ride the tiger in the modern world, and maybe people join groups. But, the problem I have with these groups is that they're not really self-improvement groups, at least not in the way that they present themselves. They really present themselves as self-destruction groups. They present themselves as groups that try to get young men to stain themselves with a brand that is going to seal their fate. And we've already had a suicide over someone who was doxxed from Charlottesville. People who are associating themselves with racial movements, alt-right movements, they are setting themselves to ruin their life, not for self-improvement, but for, a street fight. Even the Proud Boys, I mean, it's very sad. Gavin McKines, he's a comedian, he's a agent provocateur. He's not someone who, at the end of the day, his talent is not in building people up. His talent is in being edgy, and that is not really a way to help desperate people. People are attracted to him, right? And I guess he's tried to use his attractive power for good, but ultimately people are getting arrested. And I mean, is that entirely his fault? I mean, what can you do in such a system as the one we live in? But again, what is the purpose? Is the purpose getting rowdy, getting together, drinking beers, and so on? My problem is that we already have avenues for people to get rowdy and drink beers together. It's called football, right? And, they're taking a knee. Okay, then watch baseball. I don't care. I see many different avenues for young men to get together and be rowdy and be physical, having bar fights or whatever you want to do. And they can play sports, and, they can drink, and that's fine as a, proletariat way of life or a working class way of life. But if you're talking about a leadership class, if you're talking about intellectuals, if you're talking about tapping in to the potential of people to do great things, then organizations like the Proud Boys are not really equipped. And organizations like anything having to do with the alt-right are also not equipped. The Proud Boys is, again, it's a working class organization. It's not built for bringing out genius in people. And these alt-right organizations, they're also basically we're like the Proud Boys, but even more edgy. we get together and we drink, but we say even more racist things, or we'll have some kind of gathering, and we'll go have a street fight. And I mean, this is really bad stuff, and I think some intelligent people are trying to move away from it, but still, you're associating yourself with all of this edgy political things when really we can't even win Congress. I mean, this is very sad, right? If you spent less time perhaps trying to be as edgy as possible, and you had spent more time trying to win, I mean, it was like 2 seats. It's a very small margin of victory for the Democrats. But if you spent time just like trying to shift the balance of 2 seats in Congress, we would be in a very different place politically in this country. And that has a real impact on community. Like, we're talking about the wall being built, right? So we're talking about birthright citizenship. We're talking about revoking people's citizenship. We're talking about demographic destiny and the democratic destiny of the future. The electoral future of the country is dependent on what happens in the next few years. And again, if you had spent less time being edgy and racist and saying things just because you have the First Amendment, and it's one thing to have like a blog or an online news site and just post the most vile, like hateful things as possible as kind of a First Amendment parakeet or whatever. I should say canary in the coal mine, to say like, we're going to have the most extreme First Amendment stuff out there because that's the only way to ensure that we actually have a viable First Amendment. So, I understand that. That's the argument the ACLU made in the 1960s. Of course, they're making the exact same arguments today. But, they made that argument about pornography, that we need to have pornography because if we don't protect pornography, they're going to come after communism next or whatever. So I understand that argument. But in terms of forming a group of young men, trying to improve them, trying to bring out genius within them, just saying and spouting edgy political stuff and putting up posters that are meant to scare people and that are meant to polarize people beyond the Overton window, I think is a really bad idea. I think both for the individuals involved, who are likely to be branded as Nazis for the rest of their life and condemned to something really miserable, or they're just going to, I don't think that stuff helps win congressional seats. And I think that is something that does really affect communities. We're talking about communities that are being overwhelmed at this point with cultural division, with linguistic division, with all kinds of divisions that are harming people. These are divisions that are harming people, and you could have done something to stop it, and you are wasting time posting flyers about conspiracy theories, which isn't to say that the conspiracy theories were false. Like, a theory can be true, and it can be conspiratorial in nature, and it could completely accurately describe reality. But is that, the best thing to help the real situation of real people? Like, we can have this esoteric knowledge about how the world is really run by lizards or something like that, but does that really help people in the now? Again, it's not a question of the truth of the things that you're talking about, but it's a question of when you design propaganda, is that propaganda designed to be self-serving and to make you feel titillated that, ooh, I put out this really extreme, edgy stuff, and ooh, people are, calling the police, and haha, they can't do anything against me because my First Amendment rights, and blah, 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 blah. It's just this trolling campaign, and they say, oh, trolling is so effective because it angers the left. Well, that doesn't help get Republicans elected who are willing to support wall funding. I'm sorry, but trolling does not do that. And I don't know, maybe that's helping young white men be more conservative to do that sort of thing. But in terms of an organization in terms of being like, that kind of extremism in this crucial point where we're looking at a point where, and even in Brazil, right? Brazil just elected a guy who's pretty hardcore. But do we want it? Do we want the country to become Brazil before we can finally get our hardcore guy, or do we just want to get things done now? I think we should get things done now. I think we should start thinking in terms of the third person. Who is your mentor? Who is your God? What's your organization? And how should an organization be constructed to help people? It can't be constructed, the locus of the organization can't be edginess and trolling. That's not productive. That's self-destructive. And that's really more in the second stop of things. It also can't be Jordan Peterson tier of like, it's an obvious gatekeeping for the sake, not of the sake of the people he's talking to, but he's scamming them. He's conning them. He's trying to sell books. He's trying to be, he's promoting his own image and his own ego at the expense of people because he doesn't want to tell the truth. He doesn't really want to help people. So he's operating within certain constraints, and I guess he's doing the best with what he can. Is he a positive force? Is he a negative force? I don't know, but I don't think that's the best thing that you could do. He's somewhat incoherent, as most of these self-help people are. You listen to self-help people, and they just blather on and on and on, skipping from one subject to the next, very discursive, without any kind of formal structure, without any point to what they're saying. And it's all just whataboutism, and it's all just, the obviously the right wing is terrible and the left wing is terrible. And so we all just need to be moderates, and can we all just be civil again, and can we all just calm down and love one another? That's not a solution. So, I don't know. I think that's all I have to say for now. Thank you once again for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.